Do you want to add a spark to your photos? I'm Monika Zagrobelna from Envato Touch Plus, and in this tutorial I'll show you how to do a dispersion effect in Photoshop. We'll add some ashes and embers to the photo to make it look more dynamic and artistic. It's easier than it looks, and everybody can do it, but I won't lie to you. It's not a short tutorial. If you want to save time, you can achieve the same effect by using the Ashes and Embers Photoshop action, available on Envato Elements. The subscription on Envato Elements gives you unlimited access to millions of creative digital assets, with this dispersion Photoshop action included. If you're interested, I've put a link in the description. Now let's move on to the tutorial. First, open the photo that you want to work with. Before we get started, we need to check a few things. Your photo should be in RGB color mode and 8 bits per channel. To check this, go to Image, Mode. Your photo should be the background layer. If it's not, go to Layer, New, Background from Layer. Click the flyout list on the Layers panel and click Panel Options. Make sure Add Copy to Copied Layers and Groups is checked. The effect works best with images between 3,500 and 4,000 pixels high. If your image is smaller or bigger, change it by going to Image, Image Size. Go to Image, Canvas Size, select Anchor on left, and enter this value. Open the Brushes panel and drag the brushes from the attachment into the panel. Press B to select the brush tool. Make sure both opacity and flow are set to 100%. Press W and click Select Subject. Then click Select and Mask and clean the selection using the available options. Create a new layer above the background layer. Name the new layer Subject. Go to Edit, Fill, and select a color. Press OK. Create a new layer above the subject layer. Name the new layer Area. Now select a hard round brush and with any color paint over the area where you want to apply the effect. When you're done, press Ctrl D to deselect. Open the Actions panel. Click the Create New Set icon, name the set Ashes and Embers, and click OK. Click the Create New Action icon and name it Ashes and Embers Action. From this point onward, everything you do will be recorded. Select the background layer and hide the other layers. Press D to reset swatches. Press Ctrl J to duplicate the layer. Name it Base. Press Ctrl G to add it to a group. Rename the group Ashes and Embers. Select the base layer and add a solid color adjustment layer. Use this color and name the layer BG Base Color. Hold the Ctrl key and click the thumbnail of the subject layer to create a selection. Then go to the base layer and press Ctrl J to duplicate the selected area. Drag the layer above the BG Base Color layer and name it Base Subject. Do the same with the area layer. Name it Temp Trail and drag it above the previous one. With the Temp Trail layer selected, go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur and enter these values. Press Ctrl J to duplicate the layer. Press Ctrl T. Keep reference point location at left and change the width. Press Enter twice. Go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur and enter these values. Repeat the process a few times using slightly different values to create a long smudge. The exact values will depend on the kind of the photo you used and the size of your selection area. Hold Shift to select all the temp trail layers and press Ctrl G to group them. Name this group Dispersion Trail Guide. Duplicate the group with Ctrl J. Name it Dispersion Patch Guide. Press Ctrl E to merge the group and hide the previous one. Add a layer mask to this group. Go to Filter, Render, Clouds. Go to Image, Adjustments, Threshold, and enter this value. Right-click the layer mask and select Apply Layer Mask. Hide this layer. Select the area layer and use the Ctrl key to create a selection out of it. Then select the base subject layer and press Ctrl J. Name this new layer Temp Particles. Go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and use this value. Double-click this layer. Check Color Overlay and adjust the settings this way. Take the selection from the Temp Particles layer, press M, right-click on the canvas and select Make Work Path. Use these settings. Go to Layer, Layer Mask, Hide All to add a black layer mask to the Temp Particles layer and hide its contents. Press B to select the Brush tool. Select the first brush from the set. Press P to select the Pen tool. Then right-click on the canvas and select Stroke Path. Make sure Simulate Pressure is not checked. Again, right-click on the canvas with the Pen tool and select Delete Path. Go to Image, Adjustments, Threshold, and use this value. Then right-click the layer mask and select Apply Layer Mask. Press Ctrl T and use these settings. Press Ctrl J twice to duplicate the Temp Particles layer into 2 more layers. Then hold Shift and select the Temp Particles layers. Press Ctrl E to merge the layers. Press Ctrl J to duplicate this layer. Press Ctrl T and use these settings. Go to Filter, Distort, Wave, and enter the following values. Duplicate the copy number 3. Press Ctrl T and change the values this way. Go to Filter, Distort, Wave. Use the same values as before, but this time check Sign. Press Ctrl-Alt-F to reapply the filter. Duplicate the copy number 3. Press Ctrl T and change the values this way. Go to Filter, Distort, Wave, and use the same values as before, but this time check Triangle. Press Ctrl-Alt-F to reapply the filter. Duplicate the copy number 5. Press Ctrl T and change the values this way. Go to Filter, Distort, Wave, and enter the following values. Then reapply the filter twice. Duplicate the copy number 6. Press Ctrl T and change the values this way. Go to Filter, Distort, Wave, and enter the following values. Then reapply the filter twice. Duplicate the copy number 3. Press Ctrl T and change the values this way. Reapply the filter. Duplicate the copy number 4. Press Ctrl T and change the values this way. Reapply the filter. Duplicate the copy number 3. Press Ctrl T and use these values. Go to Filter, Distort, Wave, and enter the following values. Then reapply the filter twice. Select the first 4 copies, duplicate them, and merge them with Ctrl-E. Go to Filter, Distort, Wave, and enter the following values. Then reapply the filter twice. Press Ctrl-T and use these values. Reapply the filter again. Duplicate the copy number 7. Press Ctrl-T and use these values. Go to Filter, Distort, Wave, and use the following values. Reapply the filter 8 times. Set the opacity of this layer to 30%. Select all the copies and merge them with Ctrl-E. Name the new layer Ash Volume. Select the base subject layer. Create a new layer and name it Ash Large. Then make the selection out of the Dispersion Patch Guide layer. Go to Select, Modify, Smooth, and enter this value. Press M, then right-click and select Make Work Path. Press B to select the Brush tool. Select the second brush from the set. Press P to select the Pen tool. Then right-click on the image and select Stroke Path. Again, right-click on the image with the Pen tool and select Delete Path. Select the Dispersion Trail Guide group. Duplicate it, make the copy visible, and merge it. Name it Ash. Drag the layer above the Ash Volume layer. Take the selection from the Ash layer. Press Alt-Delete to fill the selection with black. Press Ctrl-D to deselect. Go to Image, Adjustments, Desaturate. Take the selection from the Ash Large layer and add a layer mask to it. Apply the layer mask. Select the Ash Volume layer and set the opacity to 40%. Select the Ash Large layer and press Ctrl-J to duplicate it. Select the Dispersion Trail Guide group. Duplicate it, make the copy visible, and merge it. Make a selection out of it, select the copy of the Ash Large layer, and add a layer mask to it. Then remove the merged group layer. Select the layer thumbnail of the Ash Large copy layer. Then click the chain link next to it. Press Ctrl-T and use these settings. Press Ctrl-J to duplicate the Ash Large copy layer. Press Ctrl-T and use these settings. Press Ctrl-J to duplicate the copy number 2. Select all 3 copies and merge them. Press Ctrl-J to duplicate this layer. Press Ctrl-T and use these settings. Now press Ctrl-J 4 times to make 4 copies of this layer. Merge the last 5 copies. Make the selection out of the merged layer. Go to Select, Modify, Contract, and enter this value. Add a layer mask and apply it. Add a layer mask again. Go to Filter, Render, Clouds. Go to Image, Adjustments, Threshold, and use this value. Go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and use this value. Press Ctrl-I to invert the colors. Press Ctrl-J to duplicate this layer. Select the layer mask of this layer, then press Ctrl-I. Select the thumbnail and go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Use this value. Merge these 2 copies. Set the opacity to 45%. Press Ctrl J to duplicate this layer. Select the previous layer, press Ctrl T and use these settings. Again, press Ctrl T and use these settings. Select the upper copy and set the opacity to 40%. Press Ctrl T and use these settings. Again, press Ctrl T and use these settings. Add a layer mask to this layer. Go to Filter, Render, Clouds. Then go to Image, Adjustments, Threshold and use this value. Go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur and use this value. Apply the layer mask. Create a new layer and name it Ash Fine Close. Open the Dispersion Trail Guide group and make a selection out of the Temp Trail copy layer. Add a layer mask to the Ash Fine Close layer. Select the Temp Trail layer, make a selection out of it, then go back to the Ash Fine Close layer. Press M, right-click on the image and select Make Work Path. Press B to select the brush tool. Select the first brush. Press P to select the pen tool. Right-click on the image and select Stroke Path. Repeat this step, then delete that path and apply the layer mask. Make the selection out of the Ash layer. Select the Ash Fine Close layer and press Delete. Then press Ctrl D. Make a selection out of the Ash Large Copy 3 layer. Select the Ash Fine Close layer and press Delete. Press Ctrl D to deselect the current selection. Select the Ash layer and press Ctrl J to duplicate it. Name it Embers 1. Press Ctrl T and use these settings. Take the selection from the Ash layer and add a layer mask to Embers. Apply the mask. Double-click the Embers layer and add Color Overlay with these settings. Duplicate the Embers layer a couple of times, then merge them all. Take the selection from the Ash Volume layer and add a layer mask to the Embers layer. Apply the mask. Duplicate the Embers layer a couple of times. Select the last one and go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Use these settings. Merge all the Embers layers, then duplicate the merged layer. Select the first Embers layer and reapply the Gaussian Blur filter with Ctrl-Alt-F. Go to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, and adjust hue this way. Add a layer mask. With the layer mask selected, go to Filter, Render, Clouds. Go to Image, Adjustments, Threshold, and use this value. Go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and use this value. Set the blend mode to Color Dodge. Name the layer Embers Underglow. Select the other copy and set the blend mode to Linear Dodge. Name the layer Embers Particles. Take the selection from the Ash Volume layer. Select the Ash Large layer and press Ctrl J to copy the selection into a new layer. Name it Embers 2. Drag it above the Embers Particles layer. Go to Filter, Distort, Ripple, and use these settings. Take the selection from the Ash Large layer. Add a layer mask to the Embers 2 layer and apply it. Double-click the layer and add color overlay with these settings. Duplicate the Embers 2 layer and merge these two layers. Duplicate the merged layer again and set its blend mode to linear dodge. Make another copy and set its blend mode to color dodge. Make another copy and set its blend mode to linear dodge. With the last copy selected, go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Use these settings. Merge all the Embers 2 layers and set their blend mode to linear dodge. Take the selection from the Embers 2 layer, add a layer mask and apply it. Duplicate the layer and merge both layers. Go to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, and use these settings. Set the blend mode to linear dodge. Name the layer Embers Particles Main. Duplicate this layer and go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Use this value. Add a layer mask. With the layer mask selected, go to Filter, Render, Clouds. Go to Image, Adjustments, Threshold, and use these settings. Go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and use this value. Name the layer Embers Overglow. Select the Temp Trail Copy 2 layer inside the Dispersion Trail guide group and make a selection out of it. Select the Temp Trail Copy 4 layer. Right-click on the layer thumbnail and select Add Transparency Mask. Select the base subject layer. Create a new layer over it and name it Smoke Spread 1. Press M. Right-click on the image and select Make Work Path. Press B to select the brush tool. Select the last brush from the set. Press P to select the pen tool. Then right-click on the image and select Stroke Path. Again, right-click on the image and select Delete Path. Set the opacity to 20%. Make the selection out of the Smoke Spread 1 layer. Go to Select, Modify, Feather, and use these settings. Create a new layer and name it Smoke Spread 2. Press M, right-click, and select Make Work Path. Press P to select the pen tool. Right-click on the image and select Stroke Path. Again, right-click on the image and select Delete Path. Set the opacity to 20%. Take the selection from the Smoke Spread 2 layer. Add a layer mask and apply it. Press Ctrl-T and use these settings. Create a new layer and name it Smoke Trail 1. Take the selection from the Temp Trail layer. Select the Smoke Trail 1 layer and press Alt-Delete to fill the selection. Press Ctrl-D to deselect. Go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, and use these settings. Create a new layer and name it Smoke Trail 2. Take the selection from the Temp Trail Copy layer. Select the Smoke Trail 2 layer and press Alt-Delete to fill the selection. Press Ctrl-D to deselect. Go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, and use these settings. Set the opacity of the Smoke Trail 2 layer to 10%. Take the selection from the Ash Large Copy 3. Select the Smoke Trail 1 layer and go to Layer, Layer Mask, Hide Selection. Then apply the layer mask. Set the opacity of the Smoke Trail 1 layer to 10%. Select the base subject layer and add a layer mask to it. Take the selection from the Ash Volume layer. Go to Select, Modify, Contract, and use this value. Select the layer mask of the base subject layer. Press Ctrl-Delete 3 times to fill the selection with black. Then press Ctrl-D. Make the selection out of the Ash layer. Go to Select, Modify, Contract, and use the same settings as before. Select the layer mask of the base subject layer. Press Ctrl-Delete twice to fill the selection with black. Press Ctrl-D to deselect. Make the selection out of the Ash Large Copy 3 layer. Go to Select, Modify, Contract, and use the same settings as before. Select the layer mask of the base subject layer. Press Ctrl-Delete twice to fill it twice with black. Press Ctrl-D to deselect. Duplicate Smoke Spread 1 layer. Set the opacity to 100% and name it Temp Area. Take the selection from this layer. Press Ctrl-Delete 4 times to fill the selection with white. Press Ctrl-D to deselect. Drag the Temp Area layer above the Embers Overglow layer. Go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and use this value. Press Ctrl-T and use these settings. Duplicate the current layer, then merge them both. Repeat the previous step 3 times to expand and intensify the effect. Then hide the Temp Area layer. Select the base subject layer. Add a new black and white adjustment layer. Name it Subject BW. Hold the Alt key and click under the layer to create a clipping mask. Select the Embers Overglow layer. Add a Gradient Map adjustment layer and name it Toning 1. Use a black and white gradient. Delete the layer mask of this layer. Take the selection from the Temp Area layer and add it as a layer mask to Toning 1. Change the blend mode to luminosity. Duplicate this layer and name it Toning 2. Set the opacity to 60%. Add a Curves adjustment layer and name it Toning 3. Select the red channel and change it the following way. Then select the RGB channel and change it too. Take the selection from the Temp Area layer. Add a layer mask to the Ash Large Copy 9 layer. Select the BG Base Color layer. Create a new layer and name it Vignette Temp. Press Ctrl-Delete to fill the layer with the background color. Then reduce the fill to 0. Double-click the layer and add a stroke with these settings. Duplicate the Vignette Temp and merge them both. Go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and use this value. Reapply the filter 3 times. Name the layer Vignette. Set the blend mode to multiply and opacity to 75%. Let's now clean up the file to make the adjustments easier. You can now stop recording the action. And that would be all. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. Also, click the bell icon to be notified of new videos on the Envato Tuts Plus channel. This was Monika Zagrobelna for Envato Tuts Plus. Thanks for watching!